Kia ora everyone, it's Nathan Rose from Trinity Church here in beautiful Monaco, New Zealand. This week I'm excited to share with you a gripping power showdown from the pages of 1 Kings. In chapter 12 of 1 Kings, we're told the story of King Rehoboam's coronation. We're told that all of Israel has gathered at Shechem to crown Rehoboam the next king of Israel. It's a moment fraught with tension and drama as the mantle of leadership passes from one king to another. However, all is not well in the kingdom of Israel. A few chapters earlier, we're told that Rehoboam's father, King Solomon, fell into sin late in his life, and as a result, God raised up an adversary who started a rebellion against him. That adversary's name was Jeroboam, and he's about to make an appearance. So King Rehoboam and his royal entourage arrive at Shechem to ascend David's throne. And he's greeted by none other than Jeroboam, the rebel, the provocateur. Jeroboam's leading a contingent of representatives from the tribes of Israel. They've come to make a request of their new king. They say, "Your father, King Solomon, levied heavy and oppressive taxes on us. And if you'll just give us a tax break, we will serve you." It's a reasonable request. However, it's come from the lips of an unreasonable man, Jeroboam the rebel. Rehoboam's biggest concern at this point is looking weak and pushed around by this rebel, this destabilizing influence. And at this precise moment, a showdown is set up between the new King Rehoboam and Jeroboam the rebel. Rehoboam has to make an impossible, difficult decision, a decision that has ramifications for the entire history of the kingdom of Israel. What's he going to do? How does he make this impossible decision? In his book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink describes a process for making impossible decisions like the one Rehoboam is now confronted with. Willink describes how, as a SEAL commander, he often had to make what were conflicting decisions based on the circumstances and the principles involved. And he recommends avoiding an overly rigid, prescriptive, doctrinaire approach to decision making, and that instead you should follow the circumstances and principles and what's going on the ground. So in this case, what's going on? We know the circumstances. We have a new king. He's had a request, but it's come from the lips of a rebel. Those are the circumstances. What's the principle involved? The principle involved is that of servant leadership. The idea that the leader exists to serve the needs of the led, and that the leader should put the needs of the led ahead of their own. It's something that we see exemplified in the scriptures through the lives of Abraham, Moses, King David, and perfectly exemplified in the life of Christ. It's a powerful concept that transforms ordinary people into effective leaders as it creates trust between the leader and the led. In his book 11 Rings, former NBA coach Phil Jackson describes how his star player Kobe Bryant transformed from a petulant, demanding star into a gracious servant leader whose team willingly followed him. He says that Bryant did this when he realized that he got far more out of his teammates when he gave to them, served them, placed their needs ahead of his own. And as a result, he became one of the most effective leaders on the basketball court. So this is the principle of servant leadership that's at play here. So let's get back to our story. Rehoboam has an impossible decision to make. This showdown has been created between the king and the rebel. What does he do? Well, the first thing Rehoboam does is he asks for 3 days to consider the matter. This is a wise choice by King Rehoboam. As a leader, when you're confronted with dilemmas and difficult decisions, the most important thing you can do is get time so that you can get perspective and clarity to make the decision. So this is a wise thing to do. The next thing Rehoboam does is he consults his advisors. Again, this is a wise move by Rehoboam. In Proverbs, it says, with many advisors, plans succeed. And we're told that Rehoboam has two groups of advisors. The first group, we're told, is the old men, men who served his father Solomon. These are men who would have the wisdom that comes from years of experience. They would be intimately familiar with the intricacies of running the kingdom of Israel and the political landscape. The second group, we're told, is the young men. These are men who grew up with Rehoboam. They're his buddies. They know him well. And we're not explicitly told this, but I gather these were ambitious men who had designs on the senior roles at court occupied by the old men. And it's into this dynamic that Rehoboam now comes for the most important advice he's ever sought. He goes first to the old men. He says, "What should I do?" The old men say, "If you are a servant to these people and serve them, they will serve you." The idea of servant leadership. It's wise advice. However, we're told Rehoboam doesn't like this. He rejects the advice of the old men. But before we're too hard on Rehoboam, let's remember that his biggest concern right now is looking weak and appearing to be pushed around by Jeroboam. And this is a valid concern. Next, he goes to the young men, says, "What should I do?" The young men say, "You know what? You go back to Jeroboam and you tell him this. You say, you think it was tough under my dad? You have no idea how tough it's going to be under me. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father scourged you with whips. I'll scourge you with scorpions." It's a power move. Rehoboam likes this. He goes back to Jeroboam and the people. He repeats this advice from the young men, tells them that he's going to be even tougher than his father ever was. Unfortunately, it backfires. Instead of making himself look strong and Jeroboam look weak, he only enrages the people and drives them into the arms of Jeroboam. They make Jeroboam their king. 10 of the tribes go with him and split and form the northern kingdom. Rehoboam is left only with the tribe of Judah in the southern kingdom. And because Jeroboam failed to understand the principle of servant leadership, the kingdom of God on earth is forever rent asunder. It's a tragic story. So what does this mean for you as you're going about your work this week? There's two key takeaways from this story in 1 Kings. The first is, as a leader, when you're presented with dilemmas, with impossible situations, the most important thing you can do is take time to get perspective, clarity, wise advice before making a decision and rushing to action. This is incredibly important. The second takeaway is that as a leader, the most important principle you can follow is that of servant leadership, placing the needs of the led ahead of your own, because in so doing, you will become an incredibly effective leader. And more importantly, you will emulate the life of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful.